to Shaq for hosting us. Pretty much all our meetups are hosted by Shaq. John used to be here. John is no longer here, so William is in charge. Thanks, William. And Glitch, thank you for coming today and presenting Vagrant to AWS today. And Colin is going to present us, talk about the Vagrant on AWS. Colin?
Quick show of hands. How many folks use Vagrant? Okay. How many folks are interested in Vagrant or have heard about Vagrant? Okay, a couple of folks. And how many folks run the exact same like Vagrant infrastructure or this exact same like Vagrant virtual boxes that they run in Amazon? So like, do you use Vagrant to run Linux and then like say Ubuntu in Vagrant and then run Ubuntu in Amazon? Are there any folks that do this? Yes. So you have what you would call local development and production parity. Okay, any other folks experience the joys of local development production environment parity? I could tell you it's great. Like you never have, how many folks have developers that are going, well, it ran on OS 10, but it doesn't run on my Linux box? Yeah, we got a couple, okay. How about Windows? Where they're like, oh, it ran on Windows, but it won't run on Linux. Come on, there's gotta be a couple of people out there who have developers running Windows. We'll get into a couple of problems that I see and why I like doing this so much. First, a little bit about who I am. I'm Amazon certified solutions architect. I'm an Amazon certified SysOps person. I'm also an Amazon certified trainer. And then I've worked at a bunch of companies in the Bay Area. Some of these guys you may have heard of. Lyft, I was there very early on. So I got to help build out Lyft. Lyft, when I started working with them, was literally 9 servers. And today, Lyft is probably, God, thousands plus. So Lyft just took off. 3 cities, now there's 64 cities, et cetera. So I got a lot of kind of cool experience there. I've worked at a couple of ad networks, which are really spiky traffic, which is cool. Worked at a couple of Fortune 500 companies as well, which is cool. And then do we have any SaltStack users? I always ask this, nobody ever raises their hand. SaltStack? Anybody? No? Okay, well, I contributed to it. What do I want folks who are seeing this presentation to come away with? I want folks here to understand like the pain points of developing locally, developing on cloud, and developing in Vagrant. So I want people to say, okay, maybe I want to have people develop here or develop there. So this is one of the things I want folks to see. And then this is the most important part. I really, really want to eliminate the pain of doing development and then moving that code into production. I want that to be super smooth. I want developers to be happy. I want executives to be happy. I want ops people to be happy. Like I don't want any of this, oh my God, it took a week to get something from development into production because of this or that. That's pretty much it. Ease development to production software deployment. Why am I interested in doing this? Why would I be interested in developing on Vagrant? Well, it's really fast, and I'll show you this in a quick little demo. And it's really consistent with Amazon because with Vagrant, what you're doing is you're running Ubuntu locally or you're running CentOS locally. And then in Amazon, you're going to run the exact same operating system. So that makes things just very similar, very consistent, which is very nice. And then if you're a developer, when you start, you just type Vagrant up and the infrastructure is built and it matches the Amazon infrastructure perfectly. So I think these are really nice pairing that way as well. QA, they can do automation where like it's a little bit faster sometimes to do testing with Vagrant than as opposed to like doing something else. So what does Vagrant do? Local development, and the way I'm going to propose you run Vagrant and the way I'm going to propose you run Amazon, it also is, like I said, very consistent. And then the other cool thing you can do if you get kind of advanced with Vagrant is you can build out an entire dev or QA infrastructure. So if you have guys who are like, I can't develop because I have these resources on Amazon, you can solve this problem, and then when you ship into Amazon, everything is going to be perfect. And then you can use Vagrant for testing, and I'll explain a little bit about that as well. So places where I've deployed Vagrant plus AWS, this is a description of how this works. I was doing some consulting work with a company called Empowered, and the developers were saying, look, we really love Amazon, but we want to develop locally. So if the developers didn't have an internet connection, they couldn't do development, which was kind of a pain for them. So Vagrant solved that problem. And then what the developers really appreciated down here was that they could develop into Vagrant and then they could ship in AWS. Same code, absolutely consistent. Folks were really happy about it. And then for Lyft is a SaltStack user. And in order to modify SaltStack so that we could use SaltStack to provision infrastructure, we had to further build out SaltStack's capabilities. So this is where my work in SaltStack comes from. But the idea here is how many folks have to develop like tooling that calls Amazon? Like you guys write something in Python that calls out to Amazon? I got couple of folks. Okay. So if you find that sometimes doing testing for that type of tooling, like let's say you build a tool that creates a load balancer, or you build a tool that creates an auto-scaling group or creates a security group, what you can do is you can actually use a Python module called Modo, which stands for mock Bodo. So what it does is it intercepts those calls going out to Amazon, and it says, yeah, I built you a load balancer. So normally you make a call against Amazon and it takes like a minute or 2 minutes or something like that to complete building your load balancer. Well, with Modo, because it's actually a mock, it returns immediately. So if you ever have a testing procedure, which is very complex, I had a testing procedure that required me to perform about 200 tests. Like, I'd create a load balancer, I would delete the load balancer. I'd create the load balancer with one listener. I would add another listener. So I did all of this work. Literally, I had 200 items to test. It took forever. When I would do these 200 items, when I would test these 200 items, I'd get tired, I'd make mistakes, people would interrupt me, all kinds of bad things would happen during testing. So what I did was I used Vagrant plus Bodo, and then I used Modo to mock Amazon. So if you have to do any kind of testing where Amazon infrastructure is at the back end, rather than actually test against real Amazon resources, which are a little bit slow to load and a little bit costly, you can use Modo instead. It's a very, very cool project. What's the difference of using Vagrant for doing development and using cloud development? The idea here is at Lyft, we'd have a new developer come on board. We'd literally spend 10 hours building out infrastructure for them. We had to build this thing out and this thing out and this thing out. Every developer got their own little piece of infrastructure on Amazon. So we moved that stuff into Vagrant, and then we could spend money on Amazon somewhere else. And then we had this other thing. I've seen companies where they share Amazon infrastructure. Does anybody have shared development? Like where a developer pushes code, and then another developer wants to use that same development environment? This is pretty painful. I don't know, how many of you guys like sharing computers with people? Anybody here? No, I'm kind of, I like my own computer as well. I don't want anybody to come in and like change the code that's running on my computer. So with Vagrant, like I can have my own Vagrant infrastructure or like my own virtual machine. Somebody else can have their own virtual machine. And then, we can share QA, that's fine. And production, that can run on Amazon, everything. It's great. So what does this look like, right? So these are like kind of situations you run into. So a developer, he goes to his manager, he's like, hey, I'm going on vacation. His manager says, cool, can you check everything in? Like, can you check it in tonight? And you're like, well, no, I'm sorry, I'm going to Belize. I'm not gonna have an internet connection, so I can't do any testing. That's kind of a pain. In this case, consistent local development would be a little bit better than cloud development. Then the other one, have you guys ever worked somewhere where like somebody would go in and like muck with ports on their machines? Like some developer, like they launch their new code, their new features, nobody in the world should see it. They open up port 80, Google crawls it, somebody goes and does a search. That's another reason I kind of like Vagrant for local development. And then there's this other one here, this other thing that people do that I dislike. And that's they develop on their own machine. So they check out their code base and they're running their code and they're on Windows. And they're like, well, it worked on Windows. Here's what this one looks like. So a developer comes to somebody in DevOps and they're like, hey man, it worked on my machine. And the DevOps guy is like, great. You're running macOS 10.92 and you're installing Nginx preview release. Like that's not even close to what I'm running in Amazon. Like the pain to get that code to move into Amazon and run flawlessly can be pretty great. Maybe it's a different PHP version. Maybe it's Oracle Java on, like on somebody's machine, and then on Amazon, it's OpenJDK, something like that. So this one is definitely not very enjoyable to work through. The other one, you have two developers. One developer's on Windows, one developer's on OS 10. The OS 10 guy looks over at the Windows guy, and the Windows guy is like, yeah, I'm running Windows 10, and the OS 10 guy is like, I got no idea how to help you. I don't want to run like Windows, Apache, MySQL, PHP. So a little problem there. For me, the solution to all of this is what I call Vagrant to AWS flow. So what I want, this is the perfect world here. Stand up development minutes, and we'll do this today real quick. I can SSH into things super easy. I can get to files super easy. All my changes are moved over to Vagrant. And then I can run local mocks if I need to do any testing against Amazon. And then I don't have to share my environment with anybody. And when it's time to move to Amazon, I move to Amazon like that. So how do I do it? I use the same OS in Vagrant as I do in Amazon. That solves the, like it ran on my machine but not somewhere else. So if Amazon's running Ubuntu, Vagrant's running Ubuntu. If Amazon's running like Windows, Vagrant's running Windows. And then what I do is I separate out infrastructure provisioning, configuration management, and software deployment. So when I do my infrastructure provisioning, I do that, I build my machine, and then what I do is I call my configuration management software. So how many folks here are Puppet? No Puppet people? All right, Puppet's dead. How many folks are Chef people? All right, we got Chef people. Ansible? We've got some Ansible people. OK, cool. So what I'm going to tell you is this. Build your machines using whatever you want. Build your machines using Vagrant. Build your machines using like Amazon. Call your configuration management software, and then do software deployment. And that can be different for everything else. But what I really, really want is I want the machines that the developers are using to match the machines in Amazon flawlessly. So with Vagrant, what do? You check out your code base. You type the word Vagrant up, and Vagrant will literally build the same OS and the same configuration that you're going to run in Amazon. So this makes shipping code super clean. And then the other cool thing is with Vagrant, you're going to get like real-time changes. So you can like edit a file, and that's automatically updated. How do you set up Amazon to do this? You just basically, how many folks use CloudFormation? All right, we'll do a little CloudFormation work. I'll walk you guys really quickly through a CloudFormation file, show you how this works. So this is how it works. And we'll do this very quickly. Vagrant is going to create an Ubuntu. In my case, Vagrant's going to create an Ubuntu instance. And then Amazon with CloudFormation is going to do the exact same thing. So here I already have parity, same operating system. Like my developer's happy because his machine matches what's in Amazon. As an operations person, I'm happy because I'm running the same exact thing that the developer is. There's no hiccups here in terms of operating system. What happens next? Ubuntu's done, it comes up, it's powered on, and then I run configuration management. In our room here, I think everybody's just using Chef. So what do? If I'm running locally, I run Chef. If I'm running in Amazon, I'm using Chef. Same exact thing. And then the last thing I just need to do is put the software on the box. In the case of Vagrant, what I'm going to do is sync directory. And then with Amazon, I'm going to use like code deploy. So next 15 minutes, I'll do the demo. I'll take questions for folks.